Hello, everyone. I'm Daisy from Oklahoma, and my mentor for my Polygence project was Hannah Stewart. And as a student who has taken state testing before, I chose to research standardized testing. And I'm sure I'm presenting to many students, especially those who are based in the United States of America. I'm also sure that you guys have had to take state-sponsored standardized testing before. As it stands, most states for grades K through 12 are required to have yearly standardized testing. And that means standardized testing is really important for education as a whole, since it affects almost every single public school student. But have any of you wondered what the policy making behind these tests was? That was a question I asked myself when conducting a literature review of this issue. My method was reading literature from databases such as PubMed and JSTOR, using these keywords, and then using Google Scholar to cross-check the contents of these searches. And so the first bill is No Child Left Behind, passed in 2008, mandated schools to use standardized tests to test students on whether they met certain national standards or not. And using the carrot and stick method, schools who did not meet those standards were punished, and schools who met or exceeded those standards were often given extra funding. So, what actually happened once it was passed? Some of the biggest impacts of the act were that curriculums narrowed, as teachers only taught within the scope of standardized tests, and any topics outside the scope of these tests weren't covered, especially in art and music departments. For example, in Ohio, 43% of music programs were reduced following the passing of No Child Left Behind. Another issue is that education is not standardized. No Child Left Behind stipulated that 98% of students were required to meet those standards and allowed schools to omit 5% of results. However, that is impossible. For example, special needs schools required specialized instructions outside the scope of the tests. This meant that special needs schools were often punished and defunded rather than given the funding they needed to fulfill their purpose. Another example are English language learners, who 9% of the public school student body who needed more time before taking such tests, yet No Child Left Behind did not accommodate them at all. The biggest issue of them all was that many schools simply lowered their standards to ensure everyone would meet those standards instead of helping students meet the standards. As a result, when the bill expired in 2007, lawmakers replaced the bill with the Every Student Succeeds Act. This act, passed in 2015, reversed many aspects of No Child Left Behind, allowing states to have complete jurisdiction over state standards and testing procedures while keeping the stipulation of mandatory yearly state testing. Additionally, this act removed many of the punitive aspects of No Child Left Behind. Schools were only punished if they were below the fifth percentile or the graduation rate was below 66%. And so some of the biggest impacts of this act is that because some states because these states were given more jurisdiction. Some states, such as Florida, developed many unique systems, such as creating a triennial testing system that took less class time to prepare for. However, because the Every Student Succeeds Act had no incentive for reforming standardized testing policies, most states did not improve their standardized testing systems to aid students. And sometimes there were regressions in standardized testing systems. This especially applied to factors such as equality, where state and school districts had no incentive to close equity gaps between schools. Therefore, when the act expired in 2020, a new a new piece of legislation was proposed in 2023, More Teaching, Less Testing. This act proposed to regulate testing to only one form of testing once per year for grades 3 through 8, and schools had complete jurisdiction on standardized testing policies for grades 9 through 12. And it also proposed to create a window of time for community input, and it proposed a 5 to 10 person task force to conduct research on standardized testing practices, and established funding of $66 billion per year to transition towards these policies. And when this bill is analyzed, while the task force is extremely helpful in the bill language, the community input is not feasible, as the bill does not clarify how to obtain community input or how to make it accessible so people can give input. And creating a regulation of standardized testing that has not been proven to work could derail systems that already work. For example, the Florida system that was allowed under Every Student Succeeds Act would be illegal if was this bill to pass. And additionally, this suffers from the same issue with placing almost complete jurisdiction of tests under states without significant national oversight. And so, after analyzing all three bills, it is clear what works and what doesn't. And so, policymakers need to increase feasibility by increasing funding and creating plans to supplement regulations to make sure that the process is what is changed and not just the result, because the process leads to the result. And additionally, politicians need to drive action by creating contingencies for special scenarios and making sure that there are no ways to circumvent the intended plans and processes. And as standardized testing has become a pillar of American education, providing metrics of where students are at, these standardized testing is not going anywhere. And these three policies that have been passed in the 21st century so far have not done enough to transform the system into a streamlined process that will support rather than hinder students' educations. So the next time you take a standardized test, think about the history of policies behind these tests and the potential improvements that can be made to assist all of us students. Thank you.